Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vedyat Ravindam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunatu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So I don't think we have Aditi this morning. So Mark, can we ask you to just do the verses in English?
Yeah, that's no problem. Hold on. So we're on the second shloka on page 85. Objection. For the Vidatsanyasin, the practice of study, etc., the means to knowledge is futile, and the knowledge itself is beyond the scope of actions, as no one can make it or unmake it or make it otherwise. So even if its subordinate position is agreed upon, of what sort is the subsequent practice?
So this is the problem of the lip Vedantins. So the truth is the self is not bound, the self does not get realized. All actions are done in the realm of Maya. Both bondage and liberation ultimately are not real. The instrument for knowing the self is the self itself. So, as Meher Baba, the great 20th century saint, used to say, everybody's already realized. Don't worry, be happy. So, the objector here is saying, well, I know that I am. What else is there to know? Why should I bother to do sannyas? Why should I bother to do spiritual practices? Of what value is all that? Because it can't produce anything real. And what this position does is rationalize our suffering. So to know that my suffering is unreal is of little help if I'm suffering. If I'm in fact suffering, it indicates that I'm in the state of ignorance. Knowing my suffering is not real doesn't do much. So there's this other process. It is the human mind that suffers. It suffers because of its ignorance. It goes through this process of the rediscovery of its essential nature. It's what gets liberated, but that gives the human mind peace. Granted, whether the mind is suffering or at peace doesn't affect the self. But the human mind's knowledge that the self in me cannot be touched, that there's nothing to worry about. Take it easy. And even more importantly, this deep understanding that it is the craving mind that is causing my suffering. It is the identification with the body that makes me fearful. And the mind is able to let go of that stuff. Now, let's see how Vidyaranya responds to this doubt. Going on.
Answer. In reply, we say that the truth should be remembered by whatever means, time after time. Such practice has been described in the episode of Leela, thus.
Okay, so Leela is a character that we find in Yoga Vasishta. So I will give you the abridged version of the story. Once upon a time, there was this woman, Leela, and she was young and very beautiful. Leela, by the way, means play or sport. And she was married to a comely prince by the name of Padma, which means lotus. And he was a hottie, 16 years old. And she was so enamored with him that she decided to do tapas and said, invoked the goddess Saraswati, and she says, if I die first, I'm cool with that. But if Padma dies before me, let his soul not leave the body. And so they grow old, and Padma dies first. She's distraught. So she invokes the goddess. And then there's a series of episodes. It's like realities within realities within realities. And in the end, what the goddess says to her, oh, by the way, Padma was originally Vasishta, and Leela was Arundhati, Vasishta's wife. And a king went by Vasishta's window and he says, gee, it'd be cool to be a king. And that's what started all this Mishigas. But the whole import of the story is these various experiences, I don't even want to call them incarnations because they're dreamlike ultimately, are all rooted in, I think it's real. And the more I focus on them, the more concrete they seem. And what we do is the opposite. We meditate on the unreality of the phenomenal world, the unreality of the personal sense of self. And here, Vidyaranya is saying, by whatever means possible, we want to break that habituated thinking, that hypnotism. So going on.
Reflecting upon that, conversation on that, reciprocally instructing in that, and being totally devoted to that, this the wise know to be the practice of knowledge.
So think about it, read about it, seek holy company, teach one another this. This is called pravachana. Probably one of the most interesting things is if you try to explain this truth to a friend who has sincere interest. And it's difficult to do. What it means is your own understanding isn't really clear yet. So we have to break the habituation in the mind. I'm my body, the world is concrete, real, and separate, and inherently joy giving and misery producing. Whatever means we can do to contradict opposite idea to that habituated thinking is efficacious. Here he calls this the practice of knowledge, jnana abhyasa. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
This apparent world was not created at the beginning of creation, nor was I created. Neither this world nor I is ever existent. This the wise know to be the best practice of knowledge.
Yeah. So remembering, asserting to myself the dreamlike nature of the phenomenal world, the dreamlike nature of the sense of individuality. What's true? Aham Brahmasmi, I am that ground of being, I am that Brahman, that space of consciousness. What is this world? Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is verily Brahman and Brahman alone. Let it go. Take it easy. Worry. This is jnana abhyasa, the practice. Any thoughts on this? I remember once Swamiji I can't remember the question so much, I remember the answer, but I think the question was why he did these camps, these jnana yajnas, traveled all over the world and did all that. And he said, it's the higher part of my mind talking to the lower part of my mind. And if someone else overhears the conversation and gets value, well and good. It was his sadhana. It was his sadhana. It was his jnana abhyasa. Going on, next verse.
The practice of the dissolution of the mind and the effacement of vasana are also described in that episode thus.
So this is the same idea that we've covered, the dissolution of the mind and the annihilation of the vasanas, which are essentially two sides of the same thing. Now, once again, when we look at the dissolution of the mind, there are two ways. One is nirvikalpa samadhi, bringing the mind in that state of absolute quiescence, where there's no thoughting. But the other understanding of the dissolution of the mind is removing the ideas, I'm a person, I have a goal, and there's struggle. That's the essence of the mind. Thinking about what you're going to have for lunch is not problematic. I-ness and my-ness, ego-prompted activity, struggle. So when those thoughts arise, renounce them. In the end, the only really efficacious renunciation is to renounce the mind. What does that mean? It means I quit believing my mind. I cannot think a real thought. And the annihilation of the vasanas, understanding I'm unhappy not because I don't have what I want, I'm unhappy because I'm stuck wanting, and we endeavor to renounce. Another beautiful maxim that we get from Yoga Vasishta: that which is nectar in the beginning, but poison in the end, is the way of this world. Ooh, gimme more, better, different, cash and prizes. Then I develop attachment, and then I suffer. And then he says that which is poison in the beginning, but nectar in the end. It's the way of sannyas. In the beginning, renunciation is painful. The mind has a tantrum when I start to give up my attachment to things. And it gets subtler and subtler and subtler. But when I do, what's left is the underlying peace, freedom. Next verse.
They who by the practice of yoga or concentration and learning from the scriptures try to realize that the knower and the known are absolutely non-existent are practicing the dissolution of the mind.
Yes. So by knower and the known, we mean the individuality and the phenomena seen. They're non-existent, seen but not real. They're dreamlike. This is the practice of the dissolution of the mind. Next one.
The understanding of the unreality of the knower and the known is called the knowledge of non-existence, or abhasampati.
Yes.
When they, the knower and the known, are not even perceived in their own forms, it is called the knowledge of the absolute non-existence.
Yes.
Atiyan, but something or other.
So the point here is, to the degree that I keep renouncing in my mind all thoughts, no personal sense of self is real, there is no inherent joy-giving or misery-reducing quality in the world. As I practice that, the mind gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And then I can more easily enter into those moments of total stillness. So even the perception of the world and the individual knower of the world fades away. If seen, indistinct. Like a movie. Next one.
There was a little bit more.
Pardon
The
me?
practice, there was a little bit more of that verse.
I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem. The practice of concentration or union with the Supreme Spirit is yoga. This is the practice of the dissolution of the mind.
So what yoga means union. What gets united? The mind gets yoked to the self. This is yoga. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the restraining of the mind stuff from forming vrittis or whirlpool-like configurations. You can do that through concentration. But in the end, the best nirodha, restraining of the thoughts, is to deeply understand their unreality. Next verse.
When the non-existence of the phenomena is realized, love and hate and the like become thinned, and then a new kind of repose is experienced, which is called the practice of Brahman. This is the practice of the effacement of the latent impressions.
So when I grasp the unreality of the phenomenal world, and when I fundamentally see it's the longing itself that is the suffering, then the volume level gets turned down, this thinning of the mind. And as the mind gets thinner, this abidance in the self, this Atmaramana, becomes easier and easier and easier. Here he calls it repose in the self. Next one.
Objection. These three practices regarding their importance look alike, and one is unable to distinguish them as one is in the principal position and which one is in the subordinate state.
So the objector is saying these things all sound the same, and I can't discern which one's the more important and which is secondary, subordinate. Let's see what Vidyaranya says.
Reply, not so. According to the need, they can be distinguished. The person who is seeking liberation needs both Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. For this, the Shruti has it thus: first liberated from ignorance while still alive, is again freed on disembodiment.
So what he's saying,
There's a little bit more.
okay.
A man, while alive, attains liberation through the divine endowments, and with the demoniac treasures, one remains in bondage. This has been explained in the 16th chapter of the Gita by the Blessed Lord thus: the divine treasures are deemed to make for deliverance and the demoniac for bondage.
So there are various layers of how to go about this. So riffing a bit on the 16th chapter of Gita, a person who strives to acquire these divine treasures. This is the chapter, the divine and devilish estates. This person, even though they don't get realized in this life, they're not Jivan Mukta. When they pass from this world, they go to Brahmaloka, and at the end of the age, they're liberated. Is that true or not true? I do not know. That's what the scriptures say. The demoniac, if he lives a life extroverted into this world, more, better, different, continues on the wheel of samsara. And as his character declines because of his anger, at not getting what he wants, then he acquires more papa, sin, and goes to lower and lower births. But what Vidyaranya is saying is that's different than the person who strives hard for liberation in this life. What is the mark of the man of liberation? He knows he's not the body. He knows this world is not real. He's at peace. In the end, there's no difference between Videha Moksha and Jivan Moksha. They're essentially the same. In this very body, when you know you're not the body, you are liberated beyond the body. And then the scriptures say when that person dies, the physical body goes to the material elements, the subtle body is dissolved into the subtle elements. There's nothing. Next verse.
In the same chapter, those two kinds of qualities are described thus: fearlessness, purity of mind, steadfastness in knowledge and concentration, charity, self-restraint, sacrifice, study of scriptures, austerity, and uprightness.
These are all straightforward. He's just simply quoting Gita. Going on.
Nonviolence, truth, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault finding, compassion to beings, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness.
So it's a wonderful list of moral qualities, qualities of head and heart, to which the mumukshu, the seeker after liberation, should aspire. Not much different than our yamas and niyamas in Raja Yoga. Qualifications of a fit student. We have many, many lists of divine treasures to acquire. These will be conducive to liberation, but also conducive to a happier life in this world. You know, why doesn't the yogi lie, cheat, and steal? Because it's crappy karma. All that stuff comes back to bite you. Next verse.
Vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, freedom from malice and inordinate pride. These, O Bharata, or Arjuna, are the qualities of him who is born with the divine nature.
He's still going on with these lists of divine qualities. So it's a value if you need a refresher on how to live in this world. We always talk about Gita teaching on 3 levels. On the first level, it's in Parama Shastra. Invites us to take on various actions, qualities of head, heart, speech, and body. Here's a great list. Teaches us to identify with Arjuna as the universal mumukshu, seeker after liberation, but also identify with Krishna. What Krishna says about himself is true about the self, it's true about you. So here we have this list of qualities at the very basic Dharma Shastra level. Going on.
Ostentation, arrogance, self-conceit, anger, as also harshness and ignorance, these, Apartha, are the endowments of him who is born with the demoniac nature.
So for the person wrapped up in ignorance, these are qualities that are conducive to misery. One of the things that we hear in the 12-step traditions. So Christianity says, well, after you die, you go to heaven or hell. Do we know whether or not heaven or hell exists? And in the 12-step tradition, we tend to say, oh, yes, we know hell exists. I've been there. And now I'm getting out of it. So we are not punished for our sins. We are punished by our sins. So understand, if we live in a world rooted in these particular qualities, as I was saying earlier, it may be nectar in the beginning, but then it turns to poison. Why shouldn't I have these qualities of head and heart? Because it hurts in the end. Okay? Going on.
The demoniac qualities are further described till the end of the chapter. There, it is indicated that Jivan Mukti takes place when the evil impressions of the unscriptural, innate, demoniac qualities are neutralized by the good impressions of the scriptural, divine qualities obtainable through personal endeavor. Like the effacement of the latent impressions, the dissolution of the mind is also the cause of liberation in life. In the Shruti has it thus.
So again, here Vijayaranya says, unlike the modern psychotherapist, where we go causation hunting, and as Werner Erhard in the Yes training used to say, understanding is the booby prize. What is the yogi endeavor to do? Thought replacement. We don't have well, first of all, let me back up. You don't really need to know where your miserable mind states come from. You have the sum total of your karmic predicament right in the now. Oh, I have PTSD because of this experience in my childhood. Well, yoga would say, how do you know that's it? Maybe it was something from a prior life that gave you the PTSD. What you know for sure is in the now, you are triggered. That's all you need to know. And then what do I do with that? I may not have a lot of control over the first thought that arises. But what am I going to do with that? If I allow the mind to follow its habituated negative thinking, its papa, then I have the mind of the demoniac, to use Gita's language. If, on the other hand, when that thought arises, I use purushartha, self-effort, opposite eye. Stock market goes down. Oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to have enough money when I retire. What am I going to do? Oh, doom and gloom, doom and gloom. What if the other political party wins? oh, the country's gonna fall apart. Gloom and doom and gloom and doom. It becomes very real. That's demoniacal thinking. Opposite idea. I live and move and have my being in thee, O God. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Ishvara Pranidhana, my trustful surrender to God. I need nothing in order to be happy. All I got to do is let go of the wanting. Okay. So, my happiness is independent of the external circumstances of the world. Opposite idea, thought replacement. That's what we do in the early stages. Break that habituated thinking. And in the end, we let go of even that. This is yoga's process. Any thoughts on this? And we have justifications. I was talking on the phone with someone who says, well, I just need to vent. Well, you can vent if you want, but that's not a solution. Venting is an attempt to get agreement for the external causes of my misery. So I can stay in that mind state. That doesn't mean to suppress or deny. Sometimes sharing with another helps us become aware of what our thinking is. But frequently, what we're looking for is agreement. Oh, yeah, that's really terrible. Yeah, you really are in a bad way. Oh, gloom and doom, gloom and doom. Next verse.
The mind alone, it is said, is the cause of man's bondage and liberation. The mind attached to the objects of sense makes for bondage, and when it is free from such attachment, leads to liberation.
And here Vidyaranya is directly drawing from Yoga Vasishta. How many times have I said both bondage and liberation occur to the mind? The self is ever free. What is my bondage? First, spiritual ignorance. I do not know who I am. I do not know what this world is. Varana Shakti. Then Vikshepa Shakti, projecting power. I think the individual knower is real. I'm a person. And I think the world is inherently joy giving, misery producing, and I become attached to it. That sows vasana, makes me want to repeat those ego driven activities, and engages me in the cycle of samsara, the karma chakra. What is liberation? There is no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction in the mind based on direct experience. Not that I'm a liberated soul, not that I'm a Mahatma, but I am Brahman. I'm that grounded being that's never touched. That kutastha, he calls it, that Vidyaranya uses in Panchadashi. Chidakasha, my favorite from Yoga. The space of pure awareness. Shankara's Chidananda Rupa. My form is bliss consciousness. Shivoham Shivo. And neither state affects the self, but it's the mind that has the problem. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
The seeker after liberation should, therefore, try to keep his mind ever free from the objects of sense, because, as has been prescribed, the mind thus freed attains liberation.
So that doesn't mean, oh my gosh, I can't think about anything. It means the yogi endeavors to not think about what's not happening, like stay out of the dead past and the unborn future. And don't let the mind extrovert into the objects with the sense of desire. This is Shama, Dhamma, and Uparati. Keeping your energy deeply introverted. Meditation in action. And the Upanishads say the Lord created the senses without going tendencies. Here it means the mind. It's the nature of the mind, the instinctual nature of the mind, to rub all over the sense objects with aversion and attraction. Yogi has to go against that many lifetimes long habit. Simple to say, not easy to do. Next verse.
The mind, devoid of attachment to sense objects, when it comes to a standstill in the heart, which is the seat of the mind, and enters the condition of formlessness, which is the sensation of the mind as an instrument of deliberation, then is that supreme state attained.
So when the mind gives up its vimarsha, its deliberation, still. Then we get the Brahmananda Rasa Swad, the taste. Swad means taste of the juice, rasa, of the bliss. Profound repose. mystical meaning of Sabbath. The psalmist says, rest in the Lord, wait patiently on me. Next verse.
The mind should be held in that state till it is dissolved in the heart, for example, completely freed from the transformations. This is knowledge, and also this is liberation. The rest, or scriptural discourse, is only dwelling upon it in detail.
Yes. So here he says it's so simple in the end. Come home. Come home. All the rest of the scriptures, just elaboration on it, pointing, trying to imply the same thing with different words. Very simple. And if the mind cannot yet abide in the self, what's the reason? Attachment and identification. So simple. What must I do? Abide. Next verse.
Bondage is of two kinds, strong and moderate. Among them, the demoniac endowment, being the direct cause of sorrow, is the strong bondage. Since the perception of duality alone is not miserable in itself, and also because it is the generator of the demoniac qualities, it is treated as moderate bondage. By the effacement of the latent impressions, only the strong bondage is removed. But by the dissolution of the mind, both of them are removed. It may then be argued that since the dissolution of the mind is competent enough, the effacement of the latent impressions is pointless. But it is not so, because when the powerful prarabdha, which is the cause of experiencing of pleasure or pain, brings the mind into action, then the effacement of latent impressions is needed to remove the strong bondage. The unavoidable experiencing of pleasure or pain may be brought about by moderate bondage also. All the mental transformations that are caused by tamoguna are to be known as strong bondage, and the transformations caused by the sattva and rajaguna are to be known as moderate bondage. This has been explained while dealing with he whose mind is not shaken by adversity, who does not hanker after happiness.
So here he's talking about the karmic predicament. How strong is the reactive mind for you and me? For some of us, we get triggered, use the modern term, very easily. Anger arises, fear arises, greed arises, lust arises. Have very little control over it. Here we got to work on letting it go. The moderate bondage is in meditation, my mind just won't settle down. I, the individual, am still there. I'm thinking about work, and I'm thinking about relationship, and thinking about food, and thinking about politics, not particularly getting upset about it, but it's there. He calls that moderate bond. I've got to do the tapas if it's strong. If it's moderate, here, continuing to quit believing in the mind. Next verse.
Objection. If it is so that the moderate bondage is to be accepted, and the strong bondage can be removed by the effacement of the latent impressions alone, then there is no need for the dissolution of the mind.
Let's see what he says.
Reply. It cannot be said so, because the inevitable experiencing of pleasure and pain brought about by a weak prarabdha is counteracted by the dissolution of the mind. Such experiencing can be removed by counteraction. Keeping this in mind, it is said thus: had it been possible to prevent inevitable experiencing of pleasure and pain, then Nala, Rama, and Yushidhira would never have become stricken with affliction.
Probably it's Yudhishthira, right?
Yeah, Yudhishthira, sorry.
Yeah, that's Arjun's brother. So the point that he's saying here, this is my interpretation. There are some people who, to some degree, know that I am that eternal subject. Mind is unreal. Since it's unreal, why should I bother dealing with its presence or absence? So I let this moderate bondage continue. And I have projects and I enjoy the world and I do this and I do that. These are good people. There's still a sense I'm a person. Then, if we get the great punya to meet a person who's retired into the cell, a Mahatma, then we see, oh, no, there's something much, much deeper, much different. Shankara says, who's a full knower of the Supreme, who has retired into the Supreme. Whether or not that's our prarabdha, to have those deep samadhis again. Those things are largely karmic. Next one.
Thus, the effacement of the lateral impression of the latent impressions and the dissolution of the mind are essential, as they are the direct means to Jivan Mukti and the knowledge of truth. Being a immediate cause as producing these two is the secondary. Many times it has been mentioned in the Shruti that knowledge is the cause of destruction of the latent impressions.
So I think what he's saying here is, in the end, knowledge of the self is the summum bonum. The other things, the working on the effacement of the latent tendencies, valuable. I wouldn't worry about these two too much. I think he's making a big deal out of stuff that isn't a big deal. Viveka Vairagya Cha, discriminate between the real and the unreal, the self and the not self. Let go of attachment to all experiences gained through the senses and any personal sense of self. That's how Shankara puts it. Simpler. I think it's an easier way to approach it. Whether it's dissolution of the mind or the effacement of the vasanas, I wouldn't worry about it. Any thoughts on this? All right, next one.
When God is known, all fetters fall off. By realizing God through concentration on the self, the wise man leaves behind both joy and sorrow.
Probably a quote, but when God, meaning yourself, is known, concern of worldly joy and worldly sorrow drops. Fear drops away. Everything drops away. All right, let's do one more, and we'll quit a little early today.
It's another quote from Chandogya, which says, "He who knows the self crosses over sorrow."
Yes. That's fine. Next one.
Then what delusion and what sorrow can there be for him who sees the oneness? Another quote.
Yes. One more.
By knowing God is freed from all fetters. Another quote.
One more.
The knowledge of reality, it is evident from the Shrutis, is also the cause of the dissolution of the mind. Referring to the state of realization, the Shruti has it thus. But when verily everything has become his own self, then by what and whom should one see? Then by what and whom should one smell?
So the point here is this apparent distinction between the dissolution of the mind and the effacement of the vasanas dissolves in the bliss of Brahman. In the end, I think Vidyaranya makes things that are rather simple far too complicated. Abandon the world. Abandon any idea of a limited self. Cease all struggling and striving. And rest in your own self nature. Swabha. Okay, we'll end here today. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha.